Today we hang out with athlete Tyler Rich. We get to hear his adaptive story, and we talk about his involvement in veteran organizations focused on the adaptive athlete and how you, the listener, can get involved too. We also talk about moving forward when life beats you up and a bunch of other good stuff, so tune in.
Through that tragedy taught me life is finite. You really have a short window to take what it is from life that you want and enjoy it.
You can go back to that day, February 18th. 1990 and change what happened. My honest answer is I wouldn't change it.
You're just going to have to go through it, and your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. It's my reality.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future. But you know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheel.
Just remembering me as I am, happy and energetic and full of life no matter what.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson.
Yo, what's up, everyone? We have a really good episode today for the Adaptive Tribe. But before we jump into that, in case you don't know, head over to livingadaptive.com to find previous episodes, show notes, contacts for guests, links to social media accounts, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. All right, let's jump right into this. Today we got Tyler Rich on. What's up, Tyler Rich? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. This is rad.
I was pointed to you by actually quite a few people, but two in particular from the Be More Adaptive crowd. So we want to give thanks to them. Thanks to Caitlin Connor and Jeremy Ogle for pointing me towards you, because you're a character, man. You're a funny dude. You do some crazy stuff for sure. And so I'm glad I got a chance to catch up with you and hang out with you for a little bit.
Absolutely. It's good to be here, man.
So when I reached out to you, the first thing I thought, all right, this kid, Tyler Rich, you're young, you put a lot of flavor into what you do, but you approach all things adaptive kind of like a fun attitude. You kind of put it out there. You bring joy to the whole process. So I thought, this is the personality I want to get on here right now and get this out there, because you're involved in so much stuff that's so pertinent to especially summer going into it. We have a lot of OCRs, obstacle course racing, stuff like that going on. Oscar Mike's hitting the trail. A lot of organizations are out there. You're heavily involved in those organizations. How did you get involved in Oscar Mike, man, and those other OCR organizations?
When I was in high school, I worked with an organization called SEGS for Vets that gives segways to wounded veterans to help them get around. Because I used a Segway as a mobility device, and so I would go up as like a trainer and train the new recipients on how to use their Segways. So I got involved in veterans organizations and advocacy groups in general, just in high school years. And I'm a big outdoors guy, so I would go with like Heroes on the Water and Project Healing Waters and stuff as a guide, because I just gravitate towards adaptive people that are doing cool stuff. And not to knock on the civilian community, but a lot of the vets with mobility impairments and things have more of a kind of gung-ho attitude than your average civilian. So I got hooked up with those guys in high school, and then fast forward to 2017, my buddy was putting together an obstacle course race here locally in Harrisonburg, Virginia, that benefited a charity called Canines for Warriors, which gives service dogs to wounded vets. And I think that's super awesome. So my buddy hit me up and he was like, hey man, you've got this awesome wheelchair. Like, you should come run my race. And my buddy kept bugging me. He's like, come on, man, come on. Like, just do the race. Please do me this one solid. It would be great publicity. You're linked in with all these organizations. Like, come on, man. And about 2 days before the event, he goes, hey, so I've got this team called Operation Enduring Warrior. Like, Google these guys. I think this would be your speed. So I Googled OEW, and up pops the guys, the MAT team, and their full battle rattle and gas masks. And I'm like, I don't know who these guys are, but I want to be around them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So I showed up to that race, and I got thrown on a team with the OEW guys and Jonathan Lopez. I don't know if you know Lopez or not. So he has one arm. He lost his arm in a motorcycle wreck, and he was a ranger. He was actually over in, I want to say it was Belgium, doing training with those guys when he sustained his injury. And he's kind of the face, I wouldn't say the face of OEW, but like he has a major presence and everybody kind of knows Lopez. So I set off on this course with these guys. I meshed with the guys from OEW, and I figured out real quick what a burpee was. You know, they're like, all right, we get to a burpee station, and it's like, the heck's a burpee? It's like, well, it's a push up into a jump squat. I'm like, jumping and squatting are not really my strong suit, but push-ups, yeah, I can do that. So dropped down, did a push-up, and then kind of transitioned back to standing. I use trekking poles when I'm not in the chair, and it was an adaptive burpee, and Lopez is standing in the corner just shaking his head because he absolutely loathes burpees with a passion. And he pulled me aside. He's like, and I can't even approximate his accent, but for anybody out there listening that knows Lopez, you know exactly what he sounds like. And he's like, man, I have to do burpees now? You destroyed my excuses. If they see you doing that, I have to do them.
I want to hit on this, though, because so for the listeners know, when you hit an OCR, man, you got more going on than most, you know? What are you coming from? I understand it's spastic cerebral palsy. When you're out there doing a burpee, when you're out there doing other stuff, you're fighting another battle that other people don't have to hit.
So with my CP, I have what they call spastic diplegia. So it primarily affects the lower limbs.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with CP is it's not progressive, but what they don't tell you and what I've kind of learned over the years, and I kind of advocate to people, is your body is incredibly inefficient. Like you're just beating your joints up. You're basically the British equivalent of United Cerebral Palsy, which is like the big national advocacy group, helped fund a study on biomechanical efficiency of moderately active people with cerebral palsy. So somebody like me that spends the predominance of the time in a manual chair or walks to some degree, up to somebody that walks maybe with a slight limp or whatever. And what they found was, depending upon the severity of the case, on average, we consume 3 to 5 times more energy to accomplish a day's basic tasks than somebody who's able-bodied.
I've seen you race, man, and you got a drive in you. You've always had a drive in you, but you also have like a really good attitude about nailing these courses and going after it. And then also you get a little wild out there off the courses. I mean, you jump from airplanes, you do all kinds of crazy shit. I see the posts that you make on social media. Have you always been out there kind of pushing the envelope?
You know, it was weird. It was kind of like a bell curve. When I was a kid, I was out there, and this was before cell phones and all that good stuff. Otherwise, I'd probably be YouTube famous right now and sitting on an island somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. You've kind of pushed it to the point that you even mentioned it. I've seen you mention this in your post, but you kind of just jump out of an airplane and your parents find out later, or family finds out later, and they're kind of freaked out. You know what I mean? Like they don't know what you're going to do next all the time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun.
I don't even know what I'm going to do next, man. And like, I did all the crazy stuff when I was younger. And then as I got older, things, my knees started wearing out and I started dealing with chronic pain and just got into a really, really bad spot. And it wasn't actually obstacle course racing that got me out of it. It was, I was considering some really stupid ways of solving problems, and I'll just leave it at that. And one of my buddies I went to school with, he actually wound up losing his battle to his demons after 3 tours in Iraq. And yeah, and this was Memorial Day of 2015. And my buddies that go out on hikes and stuff, and they're not affiliated with OCRs, they're just good buddies of mine. They said, hey man, we've got this really easy hike that you can do on the Segway. It'd be really rad. We get bummed that you're stuck at home when we're out doing this stuff. Come on. I said, all right. So we took the Segway out there, and my buddy severely overestimated what the Segway was capable of. And it was a 2-mile hike. And I made it a 1/10 of a mile before I was like, no, to heck with this, man. Just put the Segway behind the tree, cover it in leaves. We're going on foot. And they're like, what? We can turn back. I was like, no, we can't. Come on. We're going to get to the top of the mountain, because the end of the hike was the top of a mountain at a fire tower. And then there was like a, what we thought was a fire road. So they were going to bring the truck back up and pick us up. And I made it up this mountain. It took 8 hours of walking as far as I could. Then I dropped to my hands and knees. Then when my knees were bleeding and bloody, I'd flip onto my back and crab walk. And then I would cycle this process for 8 hours. We got to the top, and I took my boots off, and, you know, flipped them upside down and was like pouring blood out of my boots. And my buddies were like, what the hell, man? Like, why? And I explained that I got the phone call about my friend like 2 days prior, and they're like, whoa. And that was the awakening point of like, man, it's not worth it. Like, whatever you got going on, just keep on trucking, because it's only temporary. And then I kind of drifted for a while. I played wheelchair basketball, and that was cool, but there wasn't enough contact. I would get tech fouled out of every game.
You're like totally just swatting everybody every time you're playing. You're like,
swatting,
this shit's
ramming.
not working.
Yeah, I mean, swatting, ramming, and I don't really have the range of motion to shoot a basketball worth a damn. So, I wound up leaving wheelchair basketball right around the time I got into the OCRs. And then I found out that I'm capable of playing quad rugby under a loophole. So now I'm starting to dabble in quad rugby, which that's fair game. That's just
That's
full
a sick
speed
game,
ahead.
man. I got friends, like I've got friends that were in that original documentary Murder Ball, and I've had some on the show, and that fits the personality that you have. You definitely want to get physical. You definitely want to get crazy out there. That's a good sport for you, man, I think.
Yeah, I'm stoked. It was Rick Kohlberg from Oscar Mike that actually he kind of just bugged the living daylights out of me to try rugby, and it just worked.
That's a lot to go through. That's a ton to go through, because you see your own path and you see the physical things that are going down on your side of the aisle. And then you see a friend fight these demons and go through so much significant stuff. And you hit that part, that piece of your life where it's, you really do have the fork in the road. You do have the choice of a path, which path you're going to choose. And at some point you decided to choose the path of thriving. What was it where you said, this is it, man? Shit's temporary. Let's go.
It was, I think, so the mountain was kind of the priming thing for me. I guess it kind of rewired my brain that like, hey man, I can do really painful, stupid physical things, and I'll come out on the other side. All right. But as far as like the racing and how things have actually snowballed, I remember it was immediately after that first race I did, which it was a local race. It wasn't like affiliated with Spartan or anything or any of the big stuff I do now. And I dropped all the pictures from that race on my Instagram. And this lady messaged me on Instagram, and this was before I'm still kind of illiterate when it comes to social media, but I'm getting better. But she messaged me, and I was like, hey, what's up? What can I do for you? And she's like, I just want you to know, like, I don't know you, but like, I'm a Gold Star mom, and my son died last year, and I was having a really tough day, and I was just looking through Instagram, looking at pictures and stuff, and your pictures like made my day easier. That to me, it was like, all right, well, maybe there's something to this.
The adaptive athlete often gets noticed in that way, like it's the athlete, and I love it. I love the idea of being noticed for maybe adapting or overcoming something that might be not your average thing to overcome and adapt, which is pretty badass in a lot of ways. And that happens a lot, but you take on the role of not only being there on an Instagram, for instance, like what you're talking about, but you're also an ambassador for organizations that are super meaningful, like Oscar Mike and, of course, Operation Enduring Warrior. And these organizations do hit on some of the subjects you're talking about, wounded veterans and veterans that aren't just dealing with the physical side of the wounds, but also the mental side of it. What has this all done for you to be around these organizations?
It's funny, like, especially if you have a disability as a civilian, especially a congenital disability or something from birth, you'll go into these groups of veterans with varying disabilities, and you think you have the world by the balls, and like everything that's going on, and I'm going to teach these new guys a thing or two, because like he lost a foot 2 weeks ago, and like this guy's missing an arm, and I've been at this for a while. But what you don't realize is with these organizations, you get back as much, if not tenfold more than you put in, just from being around these guys. And like for me, on the civilian side, the cerebral palsy community, I think this is kind of a shortcoming of the CP community, is it's so pediatrics based. Like the entire focus is on kids, that there's almost like a Logan's Run syndrome. Like you hit 16, 18 thereabouts, you start to age out of the youth programs, you start to presumably you graduate high school, right? And you either go off to college or go into the workforce, whatever. You lose your peer group, your structure, and you're like, what the heck do I do now? I know that was the case for me. And these organizations, even though I'm not the primary audience for these organizations, and I just go in as a community ambassador, same as anybody else with on their feet. But those organizations kind of fill that void that's missing in my life of like, all right, I've got people, I have people around me, and regardless of what our disability is or how we sustained it, at the end of the day, we're all adaptive people, and we all, the world doesn't really care whether you lost a leg to an IED or you got hit by a car on a motorcycle. You're all kind of in it together.
How do you get involved in these organizations like Oscar Mike?
So like Oscar Mike, it's pretty rad. I mean, basically you just show up. So Oscar Mike has a presence at all of the Honor Series events with Spartan. So the venues that are affiliated with military installations, we typically have a tent there, and you can swing by and meet us, check us out, and if you volunteer to run a race with Team Oscar Mike, you get a sweet T-shirt. You'll probably see it at a Spartan if you haven't already. It's basically our brown team t-shirt. So anytime you see all these guys running around with crosshairs and 11s on their back in brown shirts, that's all us. And it's kind of like a mafia, you know, we descend upon these Spartan races, and it's as much about helping the athlete as it is about helping yourself. The mindset that's fostered by just being around these people is just awesome for everybody.
I think it's really rad to see the group out in full force. I also think it's rad when you guys are, your approach is, we're going to kick your ass no matter what we have. You know what I mean? And like having that attitude's pretty badass, because I mean, that's the attitude I grew up with. I didn't have an adaptive sport, but I figured it out to compete and beat my peers that weren't dealing with shit. You know what I mean? And like, I feel like Oscar Mike brings that to the table. I feel like a lot of organizations that are veteran based do fill that void that you were talking about. That's a great way of putting it too. You're a good ambassador for them, Tyler Rich. You really are. But that's a really good way of putting it, is that it fills a void where once you leave that pediatric realm, once you hit the adult realm, you have other people to focus with. But even though it fills the void, people do come to you for input on how to adapt to things. And you are right at the area, right at one of the most prominent areas that deal with veterans that are coming from war with significant injuries, meaning Walter Reed in a backyard. And I'm sure you've had your chance to give insight on how to adapt to things. What do you say first to a veteran that may be struggling, or not just a veteran, but a person adapting? Maybe it's their first out because they just get an injury. What do you tell them?
Just keep pressing forward, because you know, it's stupid and cliched, but my dad has a saying that I really like, so I'm going to break out the dad saying. Things are never as good nor as bad as they seem. So like, if you're having a really, really just abysmal day and it's terrible, well, tomorrow may kick ass. And tomorrow may kick ass, but the day after that might be bad. Just keep moving forward, because if you keep moving forward, things are going to get better. Like that's the best advice I can give in terms of an overall, you know, worldview thing. I mean, obviously, depending on the injury or whatever the condition may be, I might tailor my advice a little bit. You know, use the good parking if you got it. And you know, chicks love wheelchairs, you know, but yeah, in terms of a worldview advice, that would be it. Just keep pressing forward, because, you know, ultimately the good days are going to outnumber the bad days, and what might be bugging you right now may not be bugging you 2 weeks from now. Things are going to change.
What's the craziest thing you've done as an adult, since we brought up dad, to really like freak out the parents, man?
Freak out the parents. I would say it was either jumping out of a plane, because my mom was less than enthused on that one. My dad was actually supportive, which shocked me, because my dad is a second generation pilot. So he was kind of like, I've never seen fit to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, but to each their own. Because I went up there without the intention of jumping. My goal, I was working with OEW, and all we were doing was raising money and awareness for OEW's skydive program. And the folks at Skydive Orange, they sponsored. They gave us all a round of jumps, and they're like, come on. And there was one guy there who works with Mission Volant, which Mission Volant is kind of like Oscar Mike or OEW, but their entire focus is taking vets flying and doing acro sports and stuff. And he saw me and immediately like singled me out. He's like, are you jumping? I was like, I don't know. And he's like, come on, man. Like, I didn't ask for excuses. I asked a yes or no question. Are you jumping? And I was like, yeah. I called my mom late that night because we all camped at the drop zone and just kind of hung out. And I was like, so I did a thing. She's like, you jumped out of a plane, didn't you? I said, well, technically I was kind of pushed. She's like, you promised me you wouldn't jump. I said, at no point did I promise her I wouldn't jump. Before I left, I was sitting in my Jeep. She's like, promise me you're not going to jump out of an airplane. I said, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. She goes, you promise you're not going to jump out of an airplane? I said, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. I'm running late. Like, I got to roll. At no point did I actually say, I promise I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. I just said, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane.
Yeah, of course, man. Tyler Rich, when you're out there competing, whether it's an OCR or whatever sport it is, do you realize that people are watching you and you approach it in a way that they're expecting something from you and at the same time feeding off of you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially like as I've gained experience as a Spartan athlete and done more and more of these things. I mean, I honestly don't know how many I've done. I lost count. I think I'm up around 24. But I not only for the able-bodied athletes that see me, that I motivate them to do more, but everybody out in that crowd, whether directly or indirectly, I guarantee you knows somebody or is affiliated with somebody that has a disability of some sort. So by them seeing me, I know that I'm potentially opening a door for somebody that isn't even there or isn't even in the state. And like that's when I get super amped, is when I'm around new adaptive athletes that have never been on a Spartan course before. Spartan has instituted training heats. So at all of the Honor Series events, we have para training heats where guys like me and like Ogle and Caitlin, Casey McAllister, you know, they make sure that we're out at these events. So when prospective new para competitors come out on course, they see guys like us and we motivate them.
When you're out there, when I hear you, it definitely drives you, but at the same time, you offer literally no excuses. And I know that's a saying that's common out there, especially in Spartan and other realms, but you don't offer excuses ever. Do you ever get frustrated, though? Do you ever get frustrated by others that are, you know, that are perfectly capable, that just aren't going after it?
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people like that they, you know, they have every opportunity in the world available to them, and they either just don't pursue anything at all, or the things that they do pursue, they just squander or don't go after with integrity or 110%, you know, like this, everything I do, all my races and stuff, aside from Grit Freedom Chair and Warrior Pack, I don't have any sponsors, right? Like I've been sponsored by friends and things to go race every now and again. But for me, the lion's share of the events that I do, sometimes I'll get race codes from organizations that I work with, but a lot of them I'll pull a volunteer shift, and then that gets me a free race entry for another race. So that's how we make it work. And like Jeremy does the same thing, and we just go hardcore because this is what we love to do and this is what we want to do. And I see so many people sitting at home, and I think that's part of why I resonate with Oscar Mike. Like the very basic meaning of Oscar Mike is get on the move. Like get Oscar Mike, go do stuff. And I see these guys sitting at home, guys and gals sitting at home, just languishing. And I remember where I was in my early 20s. I can officially say I'm on the backside of my 20s now. It's kind of terrifying. But I remember in my early 20s, I was just sitting around not doing anything and just watching the world go by. And I've gotten to a point now where it's like, if I ran into 21-year-old me, I would just backhand the living daylights out of this dude and be like, come on, man. Like, had I had the 5-year or however long it was between those days and when I started racing head start, oh my God, I could be so much further ahead. But I mean, at the same time, I recognize to a degree that it is somewhat of it's an iterative process. Like, you can't, some guys will show up to a race and yeah, they'll do one and it's cool. And they did a Spartan and that's that. And that's the last that they do with it. And for me, like there's a guy, Martin Ashton. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Mm-mm.
So he was a British trials rider, just a fantastic dude, a fantastic athlete, and he was basically the world's best trials rider, if not up there. And in 2009 or whatever it was, he sustained a spinal cord injury, and it was a simple trick. He'd done it 1,000 times and he just didn't do it right and fell off of a bar, I think like 19 feet or something, and landed just right and became a paraplegic. But I saw a TED Talk that Martin did, and I've actually met him. He's a really cool dude. But in his TED Talk, he's like, all right, so I broke my back, and most people would be really, really depressed. And he's like, no, I was laying in the hospital. He's like, I was already thinking, all right, well, you know, my back's broken. Well, how can I be the best at this? You know, he's like, I want to be the best paraplegic in the world, whatever that means. However somebody is the best paraplegic in the world. And that line really resonated with me of, you know, yeah, I have this drive. I would like to be the best person with spastic diplegic cerebral palsy that uses a wheelchair, like, in the world. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what avenues that will take, but I'm constantly looking for the next biggest, baddest thing I can possibly do, aside from CrossFit, because I hate gyms. I'd prefer to be outside or flying through the air away from a plane. But no, I guess I'm somewhat of an adrenaline junkie, so I'm always looking for the next biggest, baddest, most ridiculous thing, because I just want to shatter excuses.
You said you want to shatter excuses. Let's help the listeners out with that right now. The listeners, they come from all kinds of walks of life, and a lot of them aren't getting going, and a lot of them are. But like, for those that are not going after it, are not hitting it, they're just waiting for whatever. What do you say to them? What's the first step, man?
Just get up off of whatever you're sitting on. Presumably you're sitting on something, or if you're in a chair, put your big boy wheels on and go outside. Like, that first and foremost to me is like the biggest and best thing you could possibly do for your mental well-being, your physical well-being, is just get outside. Like, that's where I'm most stoked, is just out in the chair enjoying nature. Before I hopped on here for this interview, I pushed 5 miles in a wheelchair. And so I hopped in my chair, bombed a couple hills, cut through the woods, cut across a little back alley, hooked into some sidewalks, went downtown, wheeled all the way back. And that's where I'm most happy and I find my most energy, is being outside. And everybody I've talked to, which I think this is really kind of endemic of the handicap community. I don't know the proper lexicon, but I'm just going to call it that, is there's such, and it starts with the parents. There's such this ingrained idea that I'm fragile and the world is going to hurt me, and therefore I shouldn't mess with going out into the world at all. And to me, like, that's so just backwards. I was so fortunate that my parents, first off, my parents are a little older, so they come from the generation of seatbelts. What are those? But they, if I wanted to do something, they let me go out and do it. And my first physical therapist, she said, no, let kids be kids. Let them earn those skin knees. And that mindset has served me so well into adulthood. And I see so many adults out there that they never had that swift kick in the backside to get out and go do stuff. And it makes me sad because I see unfulfilled lives. And not only that, but people with conditions that, I'm not familiar with, but I know that there are like kids out there that have the same condition, that if they saw somebody older than themselves out doing some amazing stuff, then maybe they would get active at a younger age. And it's better all the way around just for your body. Your body's meant to move.
There's other organizations, like you've worked with the Phillips Foundation for travel scholarships and things like that. What has that meant to you to have the opportunity to be part of that?
It's been amazing, and especially with the Phillips Foundation being cerebral palsy specific, it was kind of validating to me that they recognized what I was trying to do and kind of change the narrative of CP and how the world sees it to some degree. Because like I mentioned earlier, the whole, Logan's Run syndrome, like you become an adult and poof, you disappear. I never met somebody who was married with kids, leading like a normal life with CP until I was 21 years old.
Damn.
He was the first adult I'd ever met with CP. And that's not to say we don't exist, because CP doesn't kill us. It's just that after you reach adulthood, you kind of disappear. And for me, like, I know full well there are teenagers out there right now, especially those like me that are pretty high functioning, like more so than what people think of when they think of CP for the most part, but they're not able-bodied enough to like hide it or, join the military or whatever the case may be. So you're kind of caught in this gray area. And those are the people that I really advocate for are those guys like myself, that it's kind of like, we're too able-bodied for the disabled world, but we're too disabled for the able-bodied world. You're kind of in this gray area. Plus there really aren't that many people with cerebral palsy, doing obstacle course racing. I know of one other dude that does it, with CP, but he's on his feet. He walks with a slight leg drag. But other than that, he's on his feet. There aren't too many of us in a chair, that go out and do it. And, as far as I know, like when I was playing basketball, I was one of two rostered individuals in the country with CP playing wheelchair basketball. But no, I'm just out there to kind of prove a point to the cerebral palsy world that, hey, we're adults too, and kids grow up and they need heroes when they're teenagers.
Tyler Rich, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this. You're out, some of your social media posts, man, you're photoshopping a lot of shit in there. What's going on with that?
So that started because I was the subject of a lot of Photoshop memes. Because this would have been Fayetteville of the Fayetteville Spartan race. Not this last year, which happened not this year, which happened like 2 weeks ago. Yeah. But in 2018, I was at a water station, and it's the best way I can describe Fayetteville, because I've done it 3 years now. it's like the episode, or it's like the level in Super Mario Brothers 2 where the sun is trying to kill you.
Yeah, it's a good level.
That's that venue. And there was a water station somewhere in the middle that they actually had ice. And one of the guys I was running with from OEW, he went and grabbed ice. And I'm sitting there drinking water in my chair, kind of leaning forward. And he just grabs the back of my shirt and just pours ice down the back of my shirt. And one of the Spartan photographers got a photo of me, like with a telephoto lens, going just like full palsy, right? Like arms up, T-Rex, and like screaming, like, ah, it's cold. Well, naturally, so like guys started taking that photo and like removing the face and photoshopping it onto other things. Or one of my other friends photoshopped like the guy pouring the ice. Instead of the ice, he has a spoon with macaroni and cheese, like he's trying to feed the kid. And in amongst our social circles, we just screw with each other. Like I think it started because a lot of the guys are veterans and that's what they're kind of conditioned to do. But then you get guys like Jeremy Ogle that are just prone to jokes and shenaniganry. And Photoshop is a great way to just harass each other.
100%. Yeah, you become kind of notorious for like, let's see what he's going to shop, and throw it out there. So what's a routine like for somebody who's preparing for OCRs, somebody that has to adapt to something? You hit the chair for 5 miles today, you grinded that out. What else do you do to prepare?
So for me, I just don't like gyms and people looking at me. I really don't do a lot in terms of gyms. Most of what I do in terms of training is all body weight stuff.
You said that I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to be seen. I can relate to that more than probably most people you've ever encountered. I can relate to that. I put on a pair of shorts. I'm like, fuck this. Everybody's looking. I don't want to deal with the looks. I hate that shit. Because in my head, I have the legs of a fucking lion. You know what I mean? Even though that may not be the case. And it just pisses me off. The looks. That's what's limiting. That's what's limiting more than anything is the looks, man. How do you deal with that if you can't avoid it?
Well, I mean, as far as like the gym and stuff, I mean, there's a basic solution, and it's called tactical pants.
I always wear pants too, man. One thing is my saying is skip leg day, man. I skip leg day.
That's my issue though too, is like, because people have asked me like, dude, do you do anything for your legs? You could do like low weight leg presses or a bike or whatever. But if I do that too much, it makes my adductors and hip flexors tight. So then I have a hard time walking the next day. And I'm like, do I really want calf muscles if it's going to make walking harder? Like, no, not really.
I've seen your calf muscles. They're way bigger than mine. Second, yeah, you're right. When it comes to dealing with that shit, like there's a lot that goes in. I don't think people understand. There's a lot of thought that goes into each workout. It's not like we set out and say, hey, I'm going to skip calf raises today. Like I've never done a goddamn calf raise in my life because I can't get up on my toes that way, but I can squat, and stuff like that. So there's like different ways that I have to figure out that work, and my squats aren't pretty at all. But the point being is that each workout takes a lot.
No, I'm with you, man. It's like, hey, why don't you come down with palsy for a day and then you can tell me about my workout?
Yeah, for sure, man. You're involved in a bunch of organizations like we talked about. So you're involved in different organizations, but the resources that are offered are going to be different levels. What are some of your favorites right now that you turn to, that you can work with, that you can learn something from, or you can build community off of, that works well in helping to build, I don't know, a better life, a more active life?
My favorites, and I'm very selective about the organizations I choose to affiliate myself with, because I don't have much in this world, but I got my name, so I'm not going to put it on something that I don't believe in. And my favorites right now, Operation Enduring Warrior, and then Oscar Mike. Then from there, Be More Adaptive. I mean, the Alyssa V. Phillips Foundation is a tremendous asset. If you have CP, they're good people. Look them up. They're a small organization from Texas, but they do some really amazing stuff.
All right, Tyler Rich, man. I look forward to hanging out with you. You have a lot to your story. Your story is immense, man. And I think you're one of the personalities people need to follow. You show that there are a ton of possibilities no matter what, no matter the circumstances, albeit your circumstances are going to be different than other people's circumstances, but you show there's possibilities to go out there and kick some ass, you know, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, listeners, that's our episode. Remember, go to livingadaptive.com to find previous episodes, show notes, contacts for guests like this guest, links to social media accounts, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. Peace.